1992 saw the famous Mabo case go to the High Court of Australia, where it was recognised that the property rights of the Indigenous people extended beyond that of British settlement until extinguishment, in some cases into the present. This had resounding effects on both the country and its film industry, leading to the Australian Film Commission creating the report on promoting Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander involvement in the film and television industry. This report spoke of the fringe film industry of the Indigenous people and recommended the creation of a department dedicated to funding and supporting the Indigenous sector. By 2008, this department, along with the AFC and all other federal film and media agencies, were merged into the Agency of Screen Australia. Its core function served as a platform that provided stimulus support for the development and promotion of Australian screen productions. The Indigenous department within Screen Australia still operates much the same since its initial creation, where as of 2018 they receive a budget of $3.3 million yearly, and according to the department's head, Penny Smallcombe, this funding can be split up to create a feature or TV drama, several documentaries or factual series, with the rest of the funding an emerging media initiative such as interactive media. Over 27 years, the department has provided over $35 million in funding, backing the technological and training production costs of over 160 titles, and fostering the development of some of Australia's most celebrated filmmakers. Whilst the focus on establishing and maintaining an Indigenous presence within Australian film and television has been the department's integral focus, in 2018 a strategic reform group created by the department found that the fragmented nature of the current industry led itself to having an impact on the emerging artists within the field. This diluted presentation across multiple platforms creates a problem for Screen Australia and its Indigenous department as to how it presents itself moving forward.
The choice of content created and produced by the Australian screen industry ultimately establishes the identity and culture presented as a nation. Accurate and positive representation of Indigenous culture through contemporary mainstream media is integral in the development of young Indigenous Australians forming an identity and self-worth. Tony Schmader, Professor and Canadian Research Chair in Social Psychology, identifies this misrepresentation to have psychological consequences as a result of exposure to stereotypical media depictions. The continuation and advocacy of Indigenous-led programs and cultural depiction is essential. A positive social identity and sense of self-worth is at risk when individuals are exposed to stereotypical portrayals and misrepresentation in film and mainstream media. Schmader confirms this by stating pride in one's group connotates the positivity of one's attitude towards membership in that cultural group. Childhood and early adolescence provides numerous opportunity for one to develop a sense of self-esteem and involvement in community life. Television and media content that youth are exposed to or have access to will inevitably aid in whether their perception of self is positive or negative in nature. Early learning programs provide an opportunity for children to begin learning social and literacy skills before beginning their schooling education. Programs have the potential to affect a child's worldview as they are developing socially, cognitively, and emotionally. Successful Australian program Play School has continually provided a space for young children to play and learn through a wide variety of segments and skits. Play School frequently visits Indigenous culture through its Hole in the Wall segment. David Norris, psychometric researcher and writer for the ACER, states that accurate depiction of both country and urban Indigenous people is vital in not only shaping one's identity and values, but providing school readiness through seeing new and unfamiliar cultural perspectives. Increasing exposure and knowledge of difference, giving them practice in relating to other, enabling cultural comparisons, personal inquiry and interest, and instilling an expectation that children will see other cultures in their own classroom.
The Australian Film Commission first established an Indigenous branch for film in 1993. This in turn naturally established more diversity and identity within the Australian film scene. From this came the National Indigenous Documentary Fund, NIDF. This initiative gave more opportunity to Indigenous documentary filmmakers. Screen Australia still runs this sort of initiative to this day, allowing upcoming Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander producers funding of up to $30,000. These initiatives allow Indigenous stories to be heard within the film community and allow for a better national identity to be established within Australian film. This of course does not account for the refundable tax offsets that have been put in place to incentivise Australian filmmakers to make Australian films. This mainly includes a producer offset, a location tax offset, and the post-digital and visual effects production for a film PDV offset. Since 2001, when both the refundable tax film offset and the NIDF merged with Indigenous Australian Film Commission management, many documentaries have been benefiting from using these initiatives. Not only do these programs incentivise Indigenous filmmaking to create, they allow for more Indigenous content to be present for a large community seeking this content in Australia. This encourages a more fixed idea of national identity within Australian film and presents content for Indigenous people to relate to. Jeremy Stoddard notes in his article that many films, although having Indigenous roles within them, were not written by or for Indigenous people due to them not being able to accurately represent Indigenous knowledge or history of Indigenous peoples from their perspectives. For this reason, funding for smaller filmmakers and their projects within the Indigenous film community is important for these people to have their voices heard. With the Australian government recently announcing that it will no longer have a federal department with a major focus on the arts, we can only hope that the Indigenous initiatives do not follow suit and cut funds or initiatives outright. Indigenous representation has become a part of Australia's national identity and an important piece of history for our nation.